Hey folks, I thought I'd take a little trip down memory lane and tell you about my early days with Luca Trevisan. Quick description of what the talk is going to be structured as. I'm going to tell you about two momentous occasions, the summer of 95 when I first met Luca, and the period 97 to 98 where he was a postdoc at MIT with me, and then tell you a little bit about the intervening eras, before, after, in the middle, etc. The quick history, what is my, on paper history with Luca? I was formerly his postdoctoral advisor from 97 to 98 in MIT. I also wrote 7 papers with him, but really my most significant collaboration stopped in 98. Since then, we wrote a couple of papers, but neither of us probably would have remembered much about any direct interactions amongst us caused by these papers. The other 5 papers, though, the previous ones, were in a very compressed period of about 2 to 3 years and led to a lot of intense collaboration and learning from each other. At least I learned a lot from him. And let me tell you a little bit about those. I must say that, given that our collaboration stopped in 98, I was quite touched that he actually remembered all of those periods. And I had to go down digging memory lane carefully to extract a lot of the information, looking at papers, CVs, this, that, as you will see. And so it was kind of nice of him to even mention those periods. I also wanted to issue what we would call amongst us, Luca and I, a clarification, and that would usually elicit a chuckle from the other person because clarification was a phrase that was used by an annoying referee on some of our papers whenever they wanted to add references to their own paper in our paper. And they would say, oh, here's a clarification, and then there would be, here's a list of papers you need to refer to. So my clarifications will not be of the same nature, hopefully, but still, it's a phrase that we enjoyed using and making fun of. So the early days, Luca's first publication happened in mid-1994. This was the paper. I won't read out the title, but let me say Google Scholar unfortunately says it has 0 citations. So not something that made a dent in the world of theory of computing, but it did put him on the map. And if Google Scholar had been around in those days, then Luca would have been on Google Scholar in those days. But anyway, that's a moot point now. The second paper got a slightly better treatment. This was a paper by Luca with his advisor Pierluigi, and it appeared in FST TCS 94, so that would be making it a paper in December of 94. This was cited 2 months before it appeared in this paper, Khanna, Motwani, O, and me, and Umesh. And somewhere in the middle of page 2, we refer to Crescenzi et al. That's there here. And then it turns out when you go to the references, Crescenzi et al. Turns out to be Crescenzi and Luca Trevisan. I don't know what came in our heads that we didn't actually put in the full set of names. It's not so many more bits, but so be it. This is how it ended up. Our apologies to Luca for not mentioning him by name, but that's how I first met him. Now, a little bit about the context of the work that Luca had done in these first couple of papers, not including the one with 0 citations, but others. They were looking at what were called approximation preserving reductions. This was a definitional quest, really. How do you, if you have a reduction which maps A to B, and I would like to conclude that based on the properties of the reduction, that a beta of n approximation for B implies an alpha of n approximation for A, how can I capture a wide range of alpha and betas at the same time? The answer is it's messy. It's not possible. It's not really easy. And in fact, Luca's own paper describes this. There's a paper called Structure and Approximation Classes, and where, if you look at this in the literature, it says there are at least 7 different definitions of approximation preserving reduction. And so we'll give you an 8th. That's what this paper does. So yeah, it's a messy area. I don't know that it went very far. But I would say that it had one very important contribution, which was to bring Luca to my attention, at least, and its contribution was Luca rather than Luca contributing to this area. Um, then came our next interesting interaction. This was significant for me. They also mentioned it as being significant for him. I wrote this paper in the summer of 94, roughly, or we worked on this paper mostly in the summer of 94 and wrote it in 95. In May 95, we published this paper with Bellare and Goldreich, and it had 116 pages. My feeling at that stage was nobody's going to read this, but in a couple of months, we actually published a revision to this paper, now having filled out all the holes in the paper, and now it was 128 pages. And one key difference between the two versions was the acknowledgement section, which now said, we thank Marcos and Luca. So Luca mentioned this paper in his inspiration talk, but this paper mentions Luca also conversely. This paper was key to my and Luca's meeting in very many ways. First, I mean, he sent us a very detailed list of corrections, which was certainly something that we cared about. But it also led to something much more interesting. Luca wrote to me saying he wanted to visit. So he says, I cold called Madhu. It was really, we knew each other a lot better. And as a clarification, this was not an internship because IBM didn't pay. Luca may have stayed with us. This is not totally clear to me. My memory is vague on this thing, but my Madhulika insists that she met him then. And so Luca came, and the visit was really momentous. On the first day, within minutes of sitting in the car with him and starting a drive from New York City to IBM, upstate New York, Luca already has an idea on what we could do in the summer internship that he is supposedly doing with me, where I should be giving the ideas. Instead, he gave us the idea. He said, oh, no, here's how we could be searching for gadgets. No, gadgets are the kind of things that appear in Karp's paper, on the famed paper on NP completeness, or in Gary and Johnson. They're filled with these things. And all these years we had been working with them, we never thought that it would be an automated algorithm to find it. But Luca had an idea. In fact, he said, oh, it goes back to his reading and interpretation of the Bellare Goldreich paper with Bellare and Goldreich that I had mentioned earlier. The only hitch was, in order to find gadgets, we actually had to write code. And so we went to IBM and recruited David and Greg, and then we spent very little time actually coding it up. Greg was amazing with this thing. And then we would spend every day saying, oh, today we'll search for this problem. We set off a computer program to search for it, and it would take hours, and we would just go spend our rest of the day in the cafeteria, chat about all the problems of the universe. And it was just one of the most fun interactions. I never thought we would get a paper out of it, but we did get a paper out of it. It was a paper called Gadgets, Approximation, Linear Programming. And I want to mention also that, Greg, David, and I all felt that Luca should be the first author on this paper, given how much he had contributed to it. It's the only paper that I've written where authors are not in alphabetical order. This visit to IBM was interesting to us, sometimes amusing because Luca didn't enjoy some things, and when Luca doesn't enjoy it, leads to amusement for others, except in one case. He didn't enjoy being addressed as Luke by his landlord, having to respond to a decision tree of queries to get a simple cup of coffee, or to spend his days among elderly folks. That was how I think he thought of me and David and Greg. This is something that we found out because in the last week of his visit, he switched to Columbia Housing and then had a smile pasted on his face an entire period after that. We asked him why, and he said, it's so great to be amongst people my age. And then we realized, oops, his age is actually very different from our age. That's when we first had that realization, aha moment. Luca also gave me lessons in not English, but how English should be. He explained why the word character should really be pronounced character, but English has its flaws. Between 95 to 97, Luca graduated. He spent some time at University of Geneva, by the way, in the period, and he had at least two very memorable papers to me. The first one established that the traveling salesman problem was actually hard on Euclidean spaces and not just in general metric spaces. and has some lovely ideas in there. And then a second paper which says that weak random sources are sufficient to simulate BPP. This was kind of the holy grail in the search for extractors and better extractors, which should extract from polynomial and product of randomness. But we didn't have such extractors in those days. And in fact, we had to wait 2 years for Luca to find those. But they already scooped themselves, or Luca already scooped himself 2 years before that in this beautiful paper, which is, it's a very different idea than the one that you see in his extractor construction, but very beautiful as well. So Luca was not an unknown figure when he wrote to me saying he would like to do a postdoc at MIT, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. In 96, so the visit was 95, the IBM visit was 95, the Gadgets paper appeared then. 97 is when he does a postdoc. In 96, we met again. Madhu and I visited Rome. The excuse was there's a workshop on approximability at Udine, and I had to go. And here is a photograph from those days. This is an unfortunately sad photograph in that a lot of it just faded in the sun. It's a physical photograph that I have in my office, but it faded. And Luca's almost, not visible in the original photograph, but somehow with some photoshopping and stuff, we were able to get enough of a clarity that we can see it's him, but lost most of the color in the image as a result. This is Luca, Madhulika, me, and Sanjeev Khanna, who was also there on this visit with us. And we had a very nice time in, touring Rome with Luca as our guide. We met Luca's parents for the first time. And this was not like we were not working on papers during that visit, God forbid, but just before and just after, in fact, Sanjeev, Luca, and I had been working together and produced this paper on classifying minimization problems in terms of approximability. So fun things were happening all this period. I was getting to know Luca better and better. And then in 97, I moved from IBM to MIT. And Luca just decided on his own unilaterally that he wants to go to come to MIT as a postdoc. So he raised his own funding, actually. There was a little bit supplemented by me, but not a lot. And it was actually contrary to how he described it in his inspirations talk. It was actually very much of benefit for me, because at the first year of your faculty position can be extremely stressful, as some of you know, and some of you will find out. And it would have been very hard for me to concentrate hard enough on research. And Luca was there, and it was just so much easier. He was coming up with all kinds of interesting questions, getting my students involved. Venkat Guruswamy, Danny Lewin, who was in the theory group then, wrote papers with just me, and also had some beautiful line of work of his own on this concept of amortized query complexity, of which this paper that I'm describing here is the second in a series of 3 papers. So I've got benefits out of it. Luca's career continued to grow, mostly thanks to his own efforts. And then it just, went into orbit with this paper. This was the extractors breakthrough. Many of you probably seen this before. If you haven't seen this, I think this is definitely something that's worth reading up about. I mean, even the abstract of this paper is really like, you can just see how fundamental the question is and how easy to explain the contributions of the paper are. It's a tiny abstract which completely describes the essence of the idea. And it was like a mind-blowing result. I remember Odette Goldreich being with us at MIT in those days, and Odette was like, really blown by this result, and even taught me how to appreciate it more than I was. So this was how his career was going. There was another very nice consequence of the MIT visit for Luca, which was that he met Salil, and here's a picture from 2004 of Luca and Salil, stolen from Odette's books without permission. And this very nice, Luca and Salil, of course, starting from that time, had a wonderful friendship and collaboration during since then. also resulted in further benefits for me and got me into the pseudo-randomness territory as well, using this via this paper, which is again a concoction of the two of them. Very beautiful idea. All right, so that's about as much as I will go into the details of thing. From 98 to 2004, most I can say is, Luca and I were in sporadic touch. He would always tell me about all the significant moments of his life, him coming out as gay, his plan transitions from place A to place B, when his marriage was coming up and happened, to Jinsa. So all of those events, of course, we knew about it. We were all constantly in touch, but not on a day-to-day sense. And so we didn't have as many memories. We didn't create as many memories, but we did have a lot of very interesting photographs. It's kind of interesting that when you are far apart and meet rarely, you get more photographs than when you're together on a daily basis. So here's a couple of very interesting photographs. This first one here on the top right is my mother, Luca's parents, Luca and Madhulika, and my daughter Roshni, who's less than a month old. Luca and his parents chose to visit us in Boston, the Boston area, just a few weeks after Roshni was born. And it was very nice of them to take the time to come and see us then. Here's a beautiful photograph. Both of them seem very happy. Roshni about near and a couple of months at this stage, and Luca a little bit older. Luca moved from MIT to Dimax to Columbia to Berkeley, Stanford, Berkeley, Bocconi. So lots of transitions in his life since then. I stayed in the Boston area ever since, but we did get to meet on a few occasions. In 2005, Luca and I co-taught a summer course in Cortona for a couple of weeks. And during that period, we also made a visit to Rome and met with his mother. Here's a picture of Roshni with her mother, and the two of them were very chummy in this thing. She's always hugging her. And Luca and me also. This is, I think, the one photograph that I could find of the two of us together, just the two of us. So to summarize, it was a remarkable career. I'm sorry that I couldn't stay in close touch with him and benefit from it since then. But on the other hand, I am very happy that I was able to meet him so early in, not only in his career, but also relatively early in my career as well. He was my first mentee, at least the first formal one. I mean, his works were really characterized not only with his brilliant insights, but something that I found striking was there would be some question that we had failed to ask, the rest of us, and Luca would ask it. And then by asking it, he would suddenly unearth an entire direction in which we could not only make progress, but actually return to the original questions that had been asked and do them better. He also taught me how to think about how to teach courses. And this I cannot pass on, but really, I mean, there was this thing, at least the fact that you should think about what you want to put in a course and why you're doing it was something that he explicitly had a conversation with me on, and I found it very illuminating. I learned a lot from his talks. He didn't teach me how to give talks. I had to learn that on my own by listening to his talks. And his talks always have this thing, even a deep result where you have to go many, many, many steps before you get to the novel idea, the nugget that made the work happen. He would always manage to extract that and put it in the talk, no matter how long it was. So I think these are sort of some brilliant ideas, and I learned a lot from them, and we can learn from them also, hopefully. I also feel, by the way, talking of expositions, I mean, the number of different expositions that he has created over time, we have much to be grateful to him for. So happy birthday, Luca. I know this is a Luca Fest. So concluding with the usual thoughts that we say, words that we say